Hello, welcome back to episode 4 of the Infinity Stone podcast, where we talk about the Avengers. That's right, it's the end of phase 1. We've gone through 6 movies, and we've arrived at the big team up. And so, Andy, how excited are you to get to this moment?
So I've watched this movie probably dozens of times now. I've probably watched it at least once more earlier just this year. And the answer is really excited. Still really excited.
Yeah, no, this movie's great. I mean, and I think we're going to talk a lot more about why it's great. But this is a really fun movie, and I was excited to watch it again. And honestly, I think I was excited to watch it the first time for a lot of the same reasons. It's kind of a culmination of a lot of things, and it's a really good movie.
Yeah, and it's actually been kind of fun getting here. Obviously, there was that lull in the middle, but from this perspective, it was kind of interesting even to revisit, the two not good movies. But this is the payoff. This is where it paid off, and I will watch this movie whenever given the opportunity.
Yeah, no, this movie is worth it. So,
all right, let's take a quick break and then let's get into it.
What have I to fear? The Avengers. That's what we call ourselves. Sort of like a team. Earth's mightiest heroes type thing.
Yes, I've met them.
Yeah. Takes us a while to get any traction, I'll give you that one. But let's do a head count here. Your brother, the demigod. A super soldier, a living legend who kind of lives up to the legend. A man with breathtaking anger management issues. A couple of master assassins, and you, big fella. You've managed to piss off every single one of them.
And we're back. And before we get talking about the Avengers, we had a little visit from
Hawkeye.
Hawkeye, that's right. That's who you are, huh?
Yeah. How are you, Hawkeye?
Who's that?
Hi, Pizza Dog.
Do you want to? Should we show some of our Hawkeye skills?
Yeah.
All right.
I want to take off the glasses.
Sure, take off the glasses. That'll improve your aim. All right, Matt, are you ready for quite the archery display?
I'm ready. Give it to me.
See you later, Pizza Dog.
Bye, Pizza Dog. This is the first time Gomez in a podcast.
Yes. First time ever of Hawkeye's shooting in a podcast. I'm sure we're breaking ground here.
Yes.
I want to hit right in the camera. Oh, I actually got the screen, but you can't see it. All right. And now for our final Hawkeye sequence. Oh, yes, here.
But except I didn't give Pizza Dog a hug.
That's all right. Pizza Dog apparently didn't want one. He's off to solve his own mysteries. This segment's going to get chopped up.
You are
all right, ready?
Chopped up.
Ready, Christopher? Ready, Hawkeye? Oh. Oh. And there you have it.
Stay down.
We would try another take, but that's the best it's going to get, folks. All right. Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Hawkeye? Or Christopher? Is there anything you wanted to say? Anything you want to say to me? No, you just want to look at our shirts. All right. Good night, buddy.
Right. Have a good Avengers Day. Bye. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Big man in a suit of armor. Take that off. What are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
And we're back from our interlude with Hawkeye, and we're just talking general reaction right now. So I think we've kind of gotten at this. I love this movie. I think you love this movie. The question is, how much do you love this movie?
I might love this movie more than any other movie within this entire, franchise. And, I think that the movies do get bigger and in some ways better as we go on, especially like in the third phase. but I don't know if I love any of them as much as I love this one. And there'll be many reasons. We'll be getting into it. We'll get into it when we talk about our favorite scenes. We'll definitely get into it when we talk about the big idea. But just in general, this movie just delivered something that I had been wanting for most of my life, and that I had thought I'd gotten a few times until I saw this movie for the first time. I was like, no, that is what I wanted.
Yeah, I think that's a good description of this movie and the particular joys of it. It is bringing something to life that we hadn't really seen before, which is this big team up movie between the superheroes. It's doing it in a way that is joyful and fun and not brooding and dark. It's not filled with jars of, pee and other things like that. No, this is a movie that's about, the superheroes. And we're going to talk about why this movie works in both specific and larger ways later. But just as a general reaction, yeah, this movie, if it's not the very top for me, it's really, really close. And I don't want to prejudge where I'm going to put it eventually. But of what we've watched so far, I do know where it stands, and it's a pretty easy ranking.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there might have been better ones, and we'll find that. We're obviously relying on our memory, but the nice thing about this project is all of it will be viewed within a sequence and a short period of time, so you can trust our judgments there. But yeah, so there might be better ones. There's a couple of contenders I can think of in my head, but I don't know if any of them delivered the same feeling that I get. In part because, as you say, there's a joy to this movie, even though the stakes are big. I mean, the United States government launches a nuclear weapon on like 10 million people. So like, it's not, rainbows and sunshine, but your general feeling is, oh yeah, superheroes saving the day. And, I think that's what has always appealed to me about superheroes. But I also find that that's what now really appeals to me about superheroes. I'd gotten past the adolescent, dark hero stages where, you think that's the cooler, more grown up thing, but really it's actually just a teenager's idea of grown up. And that's what some of the earlier superhero movies were, even ones that I enjoyed and do still enjoy. It was just like, man, superheroes doing superhero things for superhero reasons. Yes.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the other big thing about this movie is the team up aspect. And we should talk about kind of how unique that is, because this movie brings together 4 different movie franchises into one, and it manages to merge them in a way that really works. And you don't feel that like there's anything that is out of place when it does it.
Yeah, I mean, they have to bring in, obviously, 4 characters that had their own movies. They bring in the tone of those movies and what those characters had brought to those movies, which were similar because they existed in kind of the same universe, but there were differences. Obviously, Captain America has a lot different tone than Iron Man. They brought in their supporting cast, obviously not in total, but from the supporting cast that continue forward. As you made your point last week, Captain America can't be for the reasons you stated. Hulk isn't because they want to forget about it, but they bring in Thor supporting cast. They bring in Iron Man supporting the cast. They bring in those worlds. And yeah, that hadn't been done before. Like movie crossovers before this, maybe sometimes 2 characters, and often like monsters. So there's not really a lot of, personalities you need to juggle, when like Freddy meets Jason, or I don't know, did Wolfman ever meet Frankenstein? I'm not that old.
He did, yes.
Yeah.
All the Universal monsters met each other, and then they also met Abbott and Costello.
Yeah, or Godzilla and somebody, right? Didn't he meet somebody at some point?
He met all the Japanese monsters like Mothra and Gamera and the other ones.
Yeah, so those are the only kind of big movie crossover type things I can think of before this. And frankly, like it never been done before is the reason why Marvel still had access to the Avengers. Because, we discussed when they were launching that, Iron Man wasn't that desirable character. Although we should stress that people weren't just buying up desirable characters, like Universal spent money, probably not a lot, but some on like the Submariner. They never did anything with it, which was probably the right decision. But yeah, they didn't want Iron Man because he wasn't big enough necessarily. Captain America was a little complicated. Thor, it's like, would anybody really like Thor? But Avengers was always a bigger property. It was a brand that had always done well.
Yeah.
You know, there's different ebbs and flows within its publishing history, but, you know, in general, somebody would have some level of interest and attachment to the idea of the Avengers. The problem is, how do you do an Avengers movie? And, you know, there was a few different tactics people would take. Some is like, you just do it with the big characters. But it's like, well, it's tough. How do you introduce all these characters at once? The second the idea that kicked around a lot was they do an Avengers movie. They call it Avengers, but use lesser Avengers. You know, that way they could piece off, you know, Captain
America
like
or
Thor.
West Coast Avengers or whatever.
Kind of like that, yeah. So you throw in like Power Man and Falcon and Hawkeye and, you know, a few other, you know, third tier ones. And like the 90s, I believe, that did that with a cartoon. They didn't use Captain America or Iron Man or Thor. And, you know, when they kicked around that idea, it's like, no, that sounds stupid. That's not the Avengers I want. I want all of these characters, but how do you do it in one movie? And the answer that they came up with, which most studios wouldn't, nobody would have done this. For one, most studios wouldn't have had access to each of those Avengers in the first place. It took Marvel becoming a studio to do it. Is like, yeah, we'll just do a bunch of movies before we do it. And that was insane at the time. You just, because what if they fail?
Right. And it's not just that, but, you know, one thing that you're kind of getting at is that the most successful movies that they had sold off were Spider-Man and X-Men. And while Spider-Man has been an Avenger occasionally, and some X-Men have been Avengers, the classic Avengers lineup is this lineup. It's, you know, this is pretty much the lineup since I think Avengers 4, I you know, except the sub in Ant-Man and I think was in there early too.
Ant-Man and the Wasp instead of, you know, Hawkeye and Black Widow, but yes.
Right, yeah. But the other four main ones, the ones they, you know, had movies for, were part of the classic Avengers lineup. So they didn't sell off the rights to the characters and to the heroes that were most closely associated with the Avengers. And so that gave them a kind of lucky break in some ways, and it made their decisions about who to build around in the absence of the most popular comic books a lot easier. Now you brought up the fact that they also integrated the supporting casts. I'm going to push back on that a little bit when you pretty much only see Shield, Pepper Potts in like one scene early on, and Eric Selvig. Otherwise, that's it from the supporting casts.
But that's something, right? Like, yeah,
it absolutely
part
is
of their worlds. Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, yeah, Natalie Portman is, you know, yeah, here she is off screen. But, you know, that is portions of their world. And, like, frankly, how much left of Iron Man there would there be? I guess, you know, War Machine, but you don't use War Machine in this movie. But, like, think of how, like, difficult, you know, movie franchises just have in a sequel or a second sequel of now we have so many characters and we got to find a way to make it bigger and we got to add this other character so people are a little interested and so that we can do more press with a new actor being added. They had to integrate all these characters and, you know, like even Iron Man 2 had a problem with just scaling up from one to the next. This is bigger than anything that had been done before that. And it was the best of them all.
Yeah, and one thing that we kind of mentioned was how well it blended the tone of this, and I think a lot of that is actually set in some ways by the score and the soundtrack, which does a great job of blending the different sounds from all the movies into one until by the end you get the Avengers theme, which is a great theme, and it's actually a blend of the different sounds. So you hear, you know, I've seen people break it down, and when they break it down, there's actually pieces of each theme in there, which is really interesting. I think it kind of really helps bridge the tones. And as the movie goes on, it starts off with the characters in conflict until they're working together. I think similarly, the tones are more in conflict at the beginning when the characters are. You see people making fun of Thor's faux Shakespearean speech. You see Iron Man coming in to AC/DC. You know, even Captain America, man at a time himself, doesn't understand most of the references that people are throwing at him to kind of symbolize how these characters are at odds when the movie begins, and the tone is slightly at odds as the movie begins to also symbolize that until the end when it is melded together into a new thing. And I think that's the thing about the Avengers and why it works so well. It's not just replicating the things that work from each of the 4 movies and transporting them in. It's blending those things into a new thing.
Yeah, and it's just like a lot of TV shows don't even manage this, right? There's TV shows that this is like the job of a TV show is to, or at least a modern TV show is to build, storylines throughout a season that, cultivate in, one, big climax. And a lot of times they struggle with that, even just like, things early just don't matter. And some of that is due to the reality of television production. And then sometimes, people that you had in certain places you can't get back or you don't want back. But yeah, and it's just like this takes in different elements of movies, and yeah, it feels like a climax to 5 previous films, and I don't think it's a coincidence that it's because they had a TV director.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point because Joss is very concerned. I mean, I don't know if this is actually true of him, but to me, I always see him as like a writer first rather than a director first. And I don't know if that's fair to him. But
I mean, I do believe he literally was a writer first.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but I think because of that, he very much concentrated on a lot of the tone and the way that characters would come together and would blend together rather than just like the big shots and making things look cool. Though we should talk about, I think, one of the most successful big shots in making things look cool, which is the Battle of New York.
Yeah, and what's interesting there is that I believe, if I recall from earlier discussions, is that he kind of let the action people do their thing. And I'm sure he had input, and the biggest input he would have is the script and the way that things come together within that. And, we'll get to it, and I know you're itching to get to it. But, it builds several stories throughout that attack, and it finds different ways to integrate people. And that actually reminded me of, like, the season 5 finale of Buffy, in which they're having to come together to defeat a god, and they each bring little pieces to it, including the glorified bricklayer. So that's but yeah, sorry, you wanted to talk about the Battle of New York.
I mean, yeah, I do, because I think a lot of the reasons why this movie works so well, it can be epitomized by the Battle of New York, and I think the Battle of New York is the crowning achievement of this movie. Now, one, it takes up a lot of the movie. Like, it's 30 minutes, 40 minutes of the movie. But there's a lot there, and a lot of it works just really well. It is, when you talk about the Battle of New York, there's multiple iconic moments from it that you remember. You remember when Banner transforms into Hulk for the first time. You remember that amazing panning shot, which obviously had cuts in it, but was made to look like it didn't, where they follow Avenger to Avenger to Avenger, and they give you a sense of how much space this is taking over, where they are in relation to each other, how they're working together, how the battle, like each of their skills that are, in play here, and how just they're fighting this battle. And that's like a really incredible shot. And you remember last week how I talked about how Thor kind of lacked that kind of action geography. The Battle of New York has that in spades. You always know, like, over, where everyone is. They have people calling out what streets they're coming down. I think Tony at one point says, I'm bringing them down 5th. It's, I mean, they're calling out like formations and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's really kind of a crowning achievement in this movie.
And in some ways unique, because often what movies will do, even like superior, action sequences and all of that, we'll just try to break things down per person. We'll show what Luke is doing. We'll show what Han is doing. And frankly, later movies in this franchise will do that. But yeah, and like within the Battle of New York, obviously you do get solo moments, but then they remember several times to bring, them together either as the big group or pair them off to have a bunch of different combo moves. And because again, that's the promise of a team movie. That's the promise of a comic book team up. And again, yeah, I watched this, for the first time, and frankly, even now, and I'm I'm a wide-eyed, preteen who fell in love with comic books, and I'm seeing, when Hulk, smashes part of a ship into the big Shatari worm thing, and then Thor finishes him off. That's a reminder of how they team up. It's and then the story itself that's told throughout, you get a rising action of the big heroes gonna be big heroes, and they start to win, but then the bad guys start to turn the tide, and you start to see them falter. And then the one more sweeping thing, especially with Tony's sacrifice, which in itself is tied back to an earlier discussion in the movie. Yeah, I do think it's really well planned out throughout.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually multiple moments that are tied and that are culminating earlier moments in the movies. You don't just have Tony's sacrifice, which ties back. You have Tony letting Cap take the lead. Tony says earlier in the movie, "I'm not a follower," and yet when the battle begins, he says, "Call it, Cap." Cap, Captain America is in charge here. He's their leader on the ground. He's their brains. He's the strategist. You have, I mean, you talked about Tony. You have Hulk. They had been mentioning all along, he's out of control, but he talks about how he really isn't. And we find out why that's the case. We have Black Widow and we have Hawkeye kind of showing their worth here. And then we have Thor, he gets his moment with Loki, which are always great moments. The two of them together have great chemistry. So it's always good when you have them together. So they have this moment, again, an emotional moment where, of course, Thor falls for the same thing that he always falls for from Loki. Loki's lying to you every time, dude. Like, just come on now. But again, so you have these culmination of individual stories. You have culmination of action. You have culmination of themes. But you also have something that's even today kind of unique in the Marvel Universe. This takes place with a backdrop of New York. If you think about the biggest action scenes, even in the more modern Marvel movies, they usually take place, as some people joke, on like empty parking lots in Atlanta. But that's not the case here. Now, obviously, a lot of this was CGI.
Of course.
But it gives it a sense of location that's so much stronger when it takes place in somewhere where we know. Even if you haven't been to New York, you still know New York from countless movies, TV shows, whatever. New York. You might not know the exact geography of New York like someone who lives there or has lived there or goes there a lot, but New York. You recognize some of those buildings that they're fighting past. And that gives it, I think, an extra oomph that I don't think any other action scene in Marvel has had.
Yeah, and this is also a thing we've been touching on in some of the previous films. Broad daylight, which is
broad daylight.
That's
the other one.
Incredibly important for a couple of reasons. One, things are clear when they're not obscured the way they are when they're fighting in Jotunheim or whatever's going to go in the street, downtown Toronto, Yonge Street / we're going to call it Harlem and Incredible Hulk. But yeah, it's just, and what was also important is color with superheroes in full bright colors. And God, it was like, and obviously they've been using color throughout, but it's a little muted in Captain America in part because that's the filter they want to use to help set the tone for the past, because the past shouldn't have too many bright colors because we don't see pictures of the past in bright colors, that sort of thing. But yeah, this is spangly Captain America in blue and red and gold Iron Man and a big green Hulk. It's color, and this is what I was in part of what I was getting at, and what this movie delivered that previous superhero movies, most of, when there's a pretty notable exception, didn't, is that they were afraid of superhero costumes because they were afraid a bit of superheroes. The X-Men, a movie that I really actually enjoyed at the time, and I still like now. But yeah, you see what Avengers is able to do, and obviously there's reasons why X-Men couldn't do it. It happened like 10 years before, and they were first out the gate. But it's just like, it's nice when they're not afraid of what they are, because that fear, that snarling, what am I supposed to do? Wear yellow spandex? It's like, well, yeah, maybe, because that's what I enjoy, and stop making me feel stupid for enjoying it. And they were able to just do that. This is a big, bright superhero action.
I agree entirely. And again, I just feel that this long sequence kind of embodies so much of what works about this movie.
Yeah, let's go back a bit to just kind of talking about the general
Yeah.
reaction. I just want to talk a bit about some of the characters because, as we
Yeah.
say, they brought in so many characters. So basically, only one character of any kind of note was introduced in this movie, and that's Maria Hill. Otherwise, everybody had previously been introduced. Hawkeye barely, but kind of. And so that really helped. It's nice that we didn't
Yes.
get origin stories, but yeah, so you have about maybe 6 or 7 main-ish characters, maybe 8. I'm not going to really count them up, but there was the 6 Avengers, Loki, Nick Fury.
Yeah, I think those are the 8 main ones.
Yeah, and I feel like the movie does well by every single one of them.
I agree. I don't think there is one of them that the movie does not serve well. Usually the guy that's left out is Hawkeye, but this is easily Hawkeye's best movie. And he has a pretty interesting role here. He's the bad guy for most of it, and then he gets turned. But he's probably the least served of these 8. Nick Fury gets to be the guy that brings them together. He even gets scenes without them. Pushing back against the World Council, who of course look shadowy and shady. 1, because they're in silhouette, and 2, because the main guy is voiced by Powers Booth, who is always evil.
It would be hard to be imagined if he wasn't. I think, is there anything that I can think of in my lifetime where Powers Booth wasn't probably instantly evil at the very least, but it would prove himself to be evil if he wasn't. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would work. It would be very interesting attempt that I probably would fail. But yeah, and Nick Fury gets moments with Loki. But yeah, it's just like they all are served really well. You say this is Hawkeye's best movie. I actually think that he actually gets a better spotlight than another movie. But ultimately, you don't need to give Hawkeye that much more. And I say that as a Hawkeye fan. But Black Widow was a pretty big standout in this movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, she was great. I love her, continued just absolute excellence at interrogating people. It starts off, in the opening scene when they call her in, she, it looks like she's completely at their mercy. And then when she takes the phone call, she's like, what? I'm getting all the information out of her. This guy's giving me everything. And the guys are in the background listening to her like, wait, what?
I give her nothing. Yeah. And then obviously that's echoed later on with Loki when she does the same to him. Yeah, no, she's always hyper competent. But what's nice about that is that that's how they present her, and that's basically how they're going to present Black Widow throughout. But they still give moments where that facade is going to crumble a bit, and not just pretend like with Loki. When she's dealing with the Hulk, both in the opening sequence, well, not the opening movie sequence, but the opening of Hulk. She's totally calm. Everything's okay. And she knows exactly what to say. We've been following you this whole time. And then he psychs her out. And she tries not to portray any emotion, but there's this jittery fear in her eyes and slightly on her face. And then you see that echo again in the following sequence with the Hulk. And it's just, for one, it's just a terrific performance by her. But it's also this nice inverse of what, usually the way you can establish somebody as a complete badass in, storytelling is have the biggest badass be afraid of them. And what's interesting is they did that as Black Widow was the biggest badass and Hulk was the person that they had to establish.
Right, because they realized that by their characterization, she's the one who would feel no fear.
Yeah, but even her is terrified because that's the Hulk. The Hulk is terrifying.
Right.
Let's talk about the Hulk because obviously we did not love his previous portrayal. He's so great here.
He's so great. One, I mean, I just love Mark Ruffalo here. But yeah, he's so great. And again, his climax, he has multiple climaxes. He has some of the best lines of the movie. He has some of the best moments of the movie. You talk about, I'm always angry. That's a great moment. Puny God, great moment. You already brought up the scene with him and Black Widow. But, even the fight between him and Thor, him trying to pick up Thor's hammer, the Hulk has so many great moments here. And even the quieter stuff, like Banner and Tony just getting along famously.
Yeah, no, I mean, this shows that, with this movie, they got it. Right? Whether it is, Joss Whedon, Kevin Feige, the collective, they got the Hulk. And part of it is they had the benefit of, we're going to save the Hulk, which every movie has to do, both because he's, a fairly nonverbal character and an expensive one to portray. So you have to save him. But in this movie and in subsequent Avengers movies, you can do that because we're getting lots of other stuff. Whereas in Incredible Hulk, we're like, well, I get it, but I don't really want this. I want Hulk. So that every time they're using the Hulk, it's awesome. He gets to steal everything, and it's just like, yes, that's the Hulk. You know, when he saves Tony's falling Iron Man, that's like probably the biggest hero moment of the entire thing. That's the, you know, and the horns probably blare. I remember seeing it in the trailer and getting, you know, like a little choked up. They know that, you know, we have this weapon and we can judiciously deploy him.
And what's great about the Hulk is they give characterization to both Banner and the Hulk in this movie. You know, Banner's characterization is obvious. It doesn't really change too much. It's just kind of the way Ruffalo kind of sells some of the lines is a little different, but he's still basically fears the Hulk. You know, now you have stuff like him getting along really well with Tony, which is a little different. And I really love the way they actually have Tony kind of accept him without any questions. Tony does not seem afraid of the Hulk because Tony wants to hang out with Banner. But then that leads to characterization for the Hulk, which they kind of hint at in the Hulk movie. But the Hulk remembers who it likes and doesn't. And so in the Battle of New York, it punches Thor, who he had fought earlier, and he saves Tony, who is friends with Banner.
Yeah, and even there, they use the Hulk as a way to, once again, show the decency of Captain America. When, they're all nervous on the ship, and, he's like, oh, what else did they tell you about him? And, right away, Steve Rogers is like, the only thing I care about is, that you're going to help us. And this movie, continues, and it just extends the shows, not only that the decency of Steve Rogers and Chris Evans' portrayal of it works in our time just as well as it worked in World War II. And it also shows that he's not a rube. I mean, obviously his famous thing is, I understood that reference. Fantastic. So funny. But like when Coulson is first saying that, like, we have the outfit, and he's kind of like, really, the outfit? Like, aren't we past that? Like, it shows that, he's not just this, old man, from back, when he's adapting to the idea that times are changing, and he's not, he doesn't want to avoid that. He's not trying to set the world back to the way he knew it, even though, he still dresses like an old man and all that. But even there, you're like, oh, I don't think people like that sort of thing anymore. And it just shows that, he's adapting, but he's still, the guy that we love from the last movie.
Right. And not only that, but another way they show that he's not a rube is that, when Tony is suspicious of S.H.I.E.L.D., Captain investigates by himself. It's the same thing. Cap is a trust, but he's also a verify kind of person, right? He understands the value of trust, but he also knows to not just put it blindly. And, that's something that I think, people think of him as naive because he's old fashioned. He's not naive, but he does want to give people the doubt at first until they prove him wrong.
And it also shows that, and this is, again, an understanding of the character. He's not just a yes man. He's not just a soldier. He's not just going to do what you told him to do. And that was an act of betrayal. Frankly, when he hears that Tony is hacking into S.H.I.E.L.D., he's obviously put off, but he doesn't go run and tell anyone. And obviously, this will continue to his very next movie. And it just shows that Captain America is the moral center of this universe. And go against that at your peril, which we will discuss in greater length in a future movie. Iron Man is great, and I think honestly, and we'll confirm this next week. As great as Robert Downey Jr. is, he is the performance of which this entire universe hangs. It's kind of like the Hulk in that it works better when he's playing off of more people, and the whole movie isn't just about him.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the great thing about Tony in this movie. It's not just that he's playing by himself. He plays well off of other people. It's that he plays well off of the people in unexpected ways. He gets along with Banner. He doesn't get along with Cap. You'd expect it to be the opposite because everyone else is scared of Banner because of the Hulk. Everyone loves Cap because how can you not love Cap? But with Tony, it's the opposite. And they have him playing off these people in different, interesting ways and kind of earning respect in ways that were, for the characters at least, unexpected.
Yeah, and then with Thor, like, this is a movie where probably it's he's less lighthearted than he was in the last film.
Yes.
because frankly, it's his villain, it's his world that they're dealing with, and a thing that they always have to do with Thor in these big team up movies is try to sideline him one way or another because he is more powerful than any of them but the Hulk. But he still manages a few good laugh lines throughout, including he's adopted, which is one of probably the top 5. A really great integration of all of the different characters, and frankly, just packed with moments. We've obviously talked about the Battle of New York quite a bit. I think we're probably going to maybe talk about parts of it again after the break here. But even leading up to it, there's a lot of great little mini scenes. I like the little battle between Cap and Iron Man and Loki. I like parts of the obligatory meet then fight. But how about we get into more specifically best sequences?
All right, listen up. Until we can close that portal, our priority is containment. Barton, I want you on that roof. Eyes on everything. Call out patterns and strays. Stark, you've got the perimeter. Anything gets more than 3 blocks out, you turn it back or you turn it to ash. Can you give me a lift?
Right. Better clench up, Legolas.
Thor, you gotta try and bottleneck that portal. Slow him down. You got the lightning. Light the bastards up. You and me, we stay here on the ground. We keep the fighting here. And Hulk. Smash.
So let's talk about the best scenes from this movie. And I know we've already talked about some of our favorites, but there's a lot to highlight in this movie. So maybe there's some we've left out.
I mean, for what I have 2 picks, both of which we've kind of started to touch on. They do both take place in the climactic finale, but there's smaller moments that I really wanted to highlight. And basically, there's a correct answer of what's the best scene in Avengers, but there's a other answer that I want to talk about first. So I'll do that, and that's within the big battle. It started, there's been a few attacks. I think Tony had to fight at least one thing, and then they all land and they circle up, and the camera pans around all of them, starting with Hulk, yelling, and then all the way through, and it's just such a, perfect distillation of, everything comic book, right? This is the iconic, hero shot that you get in a big splash page or on a cover.
Yep.
It is, the music swells. These are your heroes teaming up. And I swear to God, I see that scene, obviously, for the first time, probably a trailer really, but then in theater, and then to this day, and I'm a 10-year-old boy again, reading the same, X-Men comic for the 15th time over and over again. I'm going to the spinner rack at the local, convenience store and buying that comic at the top there because there's a bunch of cool looking superheroes. I didn't know what the Avengers were, but it's like, these guys look cool. I want to find out. That just shot itself, and then obviously it leapfrogs into the great, Cap call out the action, him barking out orders, and then finally Hulk smash. But just that panning shot, just when I watch that, I get chills, and it just, it reminds me of why I love superheroes. And frankly, when I was talking about it, that it transports me back to being a kid. It's because this stuff is for kids. And I like that this movie, well, obviously it can be enjoyed by adults. We are too talking about it right now, but that's what it's tapping into, is that feeling of superheroes are awesome and I'd like to be one.
Yeah, and there is a great oral history of the Avengers that focuses specifically on the Battle of New York that was released earlier this year, a couple months ago. I'd really recommend seeking it out if you like, if you're listening to this podcast. I imagine you like these movies enough that you would want to read that. It's a great oral history. They focus specifically on that scene. That was the scene that Joss was like, let's figure out how to make this happen, because this is a comic book scene. This is like the splash page. He compared it to the splash page too. And it's really kind of about making that happen, doing that circle so you can get that thing. And they had to kind of talk about how we kind of fudge the story reason for why everyone would pause and look at them and they'd be in a circle there. But it works so well as this iconic image there.
Yeah, and there's a thing that, I think probably in a lot of different storytellings, but definitely I hear in relation to comics, and it's important to remember when there's the person out there like, that wouldn't really happen, or that was kind of dumb. Rule of cool. is that if something is cool, just accept it because life is short and we should have fun. And now that is so cool. It is just like that. That's what I want. That's the heroes of my youth. Even though, as previously discussed when we launched this, Avengers weren't quite the heroes of my youth, but this is comic books and this is that feeling, and it still works as long as you respect it.
Yeah. So what's your obvious choice then? I think I know the answer.
It's Puny God. The best thing.
Of course it's Puny God. Yeah, of course it's Puny God.
In fact, it's so great. Let's just pause for a second. Let's watch it right now.
Enough! You are all of you beneath me. I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Puny God.
I mean, come on, that's so great. That's the best. Like
is.
When you saw it the first time in theater. I imagine you saw this movie in theater, I would hope.
Yes.
The loudest reaction in the crowd, right?
Oh yeah, we didn't hear like anything for the next 45 seconds because everyone was still laughing from that moment. There's an actual follow-up line to that, which I never heard till like the third time I watched the movie.
Where like Loki is just like the air is just squealing out of him. It's just amazing storytelling, so you have the blustering villain starting to do it and then cut off mid-second, just tossed around like a rag doll. It's amazing. It's a perfect illustration of the power of the Hulk, and it's funny. It's surprising. It might be the best moment in the history of like 19 films.
Yeah, and it comes right after a moment when Loki is being his most imperious self. This is Loki at full on Asgardian Shakespearean villain. He's lording over the Hulk, and then the Hulk just punctures him right there.
Yeah, so I mean that's the best, but obviously there's other things we want to talk about, and I suspect you have one.
Yeah, I do. So one thing that we haven't talked about a lot yet is actually a big part of my favorite scene, which is Phil Coulson. Phil Coulson, in many ways, is kind of the other star of this movie, and he doesn't really have much of an arc to this movie, but it's important the way that he causes other people to react. He disarms the Avengers in ways with his manner, with his, playing cards, with everything. But his best moment is his death scene. Well, it's really kind of like the combination of the first time he confronts Loki kills him, but he's still alive. And then he shoots Loki with just the hugest gun you've ever seen in your life. He comes in with that thing and it's like bigger than he is. But that's a really good emotional scene. And I don't know if you went to this movie expecting emotional scenes, but that one really works. And it really works to kind of illustrate this theme of heroics because Coulson says it right there, Yeah,
you're not going to win, and it is great. But obviously, we now know that scene has no impact and no meaning and no stakes because he doesn't die, and that's the way it works, right? Unless something is death forever, it's pointless and meaningless, right? That's what we talk about in 2018.
Well, I mean, I think we both disagree with that, but
yes, and we will get into that when it comes. But he comes back for a TV show that some people have watched. I haven't. That doesn't matter. The impact, the impact of this moment lands. Then it lands now, and it doesn't just land because we all know that Joss Whedon has to kill somebody. No, it's because of the way that drama works and performance and direction. And even if it is undone later, it's still the punch still lands. My son, knowing that Agent Coulson, it does come back in a show he's never watched, a character he's grown attached to because he has like a Lego figure of it, and because he's been in the comics. He was when we were rewatching it this time, which probably was like his 8th or 9th time watching this movie, maybe a little less than that. It's like, no, not Coulson. Yeah, that's what movies can do, and that's what stories can do. Yeah,
exactly. They can make you feel.
Yeah,
and I because of that scene, I feel like you get a wider gamut of emotions than you get from a lot of Marvel movies, frankly.
Yeah, and frankly, but it also shows kind of the the work that they put in, and some of it was kismet and just luck. Clark Gregg was never supposed to be that big a presence, even in the first Iron Man film.
Nope.
But they liked what he was doing. But yeah, he was a connective tissue throughout, other than Hulk, because whatever. But yeah, he had been in Thor and Iron Man, and then they found a way very early in this movie to personally connect him to, Captain America, obviously. And then as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., he would have had a connection with, Nick Fury, Black Widow,
Hawkeye,
and Maria Hill. So yeah, no, it was, and yeah, so by having him serve that role, which was very much his role in Iron Man 2 and Thor, as hey, remember, there's a bigger world, it paid off in this film.
Yeah, and it's true. And it's also, in a way, why his death made sense in this movie, because he was what drew the world together in a lot of ways. So you don't need him anymore once it's together.
Yeah, and there's some question. It's like, would he still have value in other movies? Or yeah, maybe that is kind of what all they needed. Because, I mean, frankly, S.H.I.E.L.D. will not have a big role coming up. So yeah, I would probably used him effectively through phase 1. So after we talk about the best sequences, what we typically do is talk about the biggest flaws of the film, because it feels like it's something to talk about. It feels like balance. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. So it's like, is this something it's not flawless, but is it worth discussing?
I think anything that I'd point to is more of a quibble than a real flaw. I don't think there is anything in this movie that would rise to the point where it actually actively takes away from the movie. And that's what we usually like to highlight with our flaws. You could talk about how, like it takes a little long, between, this scene to the next scene where it's good, but it's such a quibble. And there are still great moments, even at the parts that I think are a little slower than the other parts.
Yeah, and I like how the movie used a lot of dialogue cues as editing cues. Like as soon as they say, "Oh, you should have left him in the ocean," then we cut to Iron Man being underwater. Like they did that throughout, because I think this is a fairly well paced movie. One quibble I'd get into, and I feel like you were about to get into one before I interrupted you, but
no, go for it.
During the first heroes meet and then fight and then join up sequence of Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, I think many people have pointed this out before. Thor seems to show a blatant disregard for human life in that situation. Like, he doesn't know that Captain America's shield will hold up, and he's not about to liquefy him. But let's get back to what I said earlier. Rule of cool. Otherwise, the scene's pretty awesome seeing that. So.
Yeah, I mean, the motivation to make the heroes fight in that scene is strained, though. Again, not quite as strained as I remember it being. But it's more of a quibble. It's fun to see them fight. There are fun moments in that fight. It's probably like my least favorite fight in the entire movie. But, you have to have something in there to kind of keep it moving, or, in that part of the movie, because I think that's the slowest part of the movie.
Yeah. It comes off the tails of them fighting Loki really briefly. But, that fight is intentionally short, both, because obviously it's Loki's plan to get captured, but also because you do not want to, waste what's going to be the final battle with Loki. So yeah, no, I agree. It's probably the lower one, but there's still awesome stuff. When Iron Man's at 400% capacity, and yeah, it's cool seeing the shield do that. But yeah, it's like, man, when you hit that guy in a suit with lightning, you could have liquefied him. Like, yeah, it's a little out of character, but they always have to go a little out of character to have heroes fight each other, even when they build an entire movie around it.
I agree.
How about yourself?
No, I think that was the same stuff I was going to highlight. I think once you pretty much get to the part where you're on the helicarrier and your Loki's plan is coming to fruition, everything from there on is pretty much gold.
All right, let's take a break and then answer some questions. Let's see if Matt can finally beat me.
And I'd like to know how Loki used it to turn two of the sharpest men I know into his personal flying monkeys.
Monkeys? I do not understand.
I do. I understood that reference.
And we're back, and it's time for, I think, what's probably my favorite segment, where I make Matt look like a chump every week, answering questions about the movies we've been watching. Now, the good news for you is just one movie this time out.
Yeah.
Bad news for you is I watched this movie like 1.5 times over the past 24 hours. So All right, Quizmaster Alex. What's the first question? Who's it for?
I didn't like doing that.
But it was the most successful segment.
I didn't like doing it.
All right, now you got to try and beat me to the buzzer, Matt. Apparently, he just makes the rules up, and we just have to live by him.
Yeah.
He's a cruel games master, like.
I'm a
Jeff
quiz
Goldblum.
master, not a games master. This is not a game. This is very
This
good
is the contest
competition.
of champions.
Okay.
I hate you.
All right, what's the question?
What was Thor's response to Captain America saying, "Put the hammer down"?
You want me to put the hammer down? It just sounded just like that too. Do you have anything, Matt, other than to confirm that I'm correct?
I have nothing to add.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because
I think these have been getting steadily easier because he's putting them off to the last seconder.
1 hour. 1 hour. Last 1 hour.
All right. Next. Crinkle that more. Maybe do it right into the microphone. No.
You saw it.
I did.
All right.
Who is the actor that portrays Agent Coulson?
Oh, it's.
This is easy.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on his name.
I know. And people are mad at us right now that we don't know this.
Yeah.
You even watched
it's,
the TV
it-
show.
Oh, it's his first name is Greg, isn't it? It's
Clark Gregg. You're wrong. It's his last
Clark
name.
Gregg. That's his last name.
You
I'd
gave
say that
one to
counts.
me, by the way, I wasn't getting there.
No, I got his last name. This is Jeopardy rules. You don't need both names. You just need the last name.
But you said his first name is. I bet. You know what? I'll give it to you because I didn't get it myself.
You would not have gotten it without me.
Not even a little bit, and that's embarrassing. Try not to kick the table, Alex.
I was just adjusting since I have a
I know.
pillow.
This is so exciting.
I have a pillow under my
I mean, the
butt.
score is tied. All right, go.
It is.
What are the aliens who attacked? What are the
Speak clearly.
aliens who attacked
The
Earth
Chitauri.
called?
The Chitauri.
I mean, I knew the answer. I was waiting for him to say it to you, but no.
Yeah, but I can't let him do that because then you'll
I
get
know, I
it first.
All right, well, okay. No more Mr. Nice Guy. You got 2. I can't. Oh my god, I'm gonna lose the week that I changed the Chiron.
Hubris is your enemy.
All right, this is the Warriors going down 3-2 the
Trivia.
Rockets.
For some reason, that changed into loser.
His is the loser. Talk again, loser. He
No.
wouldn't. He didn't take it away. All right, let's go.
Loser.
4. Question 4.
Okay. What battle do Black Widow and Hawkeye remember differently?
Budapest.
Yep.
She's like, I didn't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah,
Do-
shut out the jaw like Kobe.
My first pronunciation of this was Buddha pig.
I mean, pest is a word you should probably know
Buddha pig.
because I've seen the way you talk to your brother. Number 5. This is it for all the marbles.
As always, coming down to the last question every week.
Tony Stark tells Pepper Potts to take what percentage of the credit for Stark Tower?
12%.
Matt wins. Matt wins.
What? How does he win?
I wanted to win.
Well, tough luck.
I want to win too.
I'll give him 12% of the win.
That's a bad joke.
Well, I am a dad. I have the proof. So,
You're not very good at that.
dad jokes. Wait till you should hear some of
And
Matt's
my
uncle
brother went
jokes.
crying because I wrecked his thing I made for him.
I'm so proud of that. All right, that's all for this week.
There was an idea. Stark knows this. Called the Avengers Initiative. The idea was to bring together a group of remarkable people. See if they could become something more. See if they could work together when we needed them to fight the battles that we never could.
And we're back, and once again, we're going to be talking about our big idea. This week, we're going to be talking about Marvel's embrace of heroism. And we've been hinting about this one for a couple weeks now. You've probably heard us say that one of the things we like about these movies is the fact that they embrace heroism. But that is especially true in this movie. So what does this say for their brand and for these movies?
Yeah, and I do think it's key. And obviously, it didn't start necessarily fully this way. Tony Stark is closer to kind of the anti-hero way of doing superheroes that had been a lot of the movies, right? Or reluctant hero, and that's part of his arc to some degree. And near the end, I mean, he literally stands up and says, "I am Iron Man." So he owns it to a degree. Hulk is, always going to be a monster. But from here on out, with a few exceptions, the Guardians are more anti-heroes than anything, although their movie ends with
they're
friendship.
more like lovable rogues.
Yeah, there you go. Marvel isn't afraid of heroes, and it's been a successful way of doing it. And it's really funny that their main competitor, who has the prototypical hero, the literally the character who created the entire genre, has been afraid of it. And there's some reason to suggest that maybe zigging instead of zagging could be a thing, but no, heroes work. We like heroes. Frankly, I understand that why you might be surprised that a modern audience has bought so thoroughly into it, but they have, and I'm happier for it.
It also works pretty well because people always compare Marvel and DC, and I think there's a lot of ways to compare those, the movies. But one of the comparisons of the comics was that Marvel comics usually feature characters that have flaws, that have failabilities. They're more human than the main DC characters, who are larger than life, who are mythic. You think of like Superman, Wonder Woman. They're kind of paragons of a certain type of hero kind of figure. They're, as I said, they're larger than life. But Marvel, it usually has characters that struggle with things. We talk about how Iron Man, his most famous story was when he was an alcoholic. So Marvel's characters have always struggled with things, but in a way that enhances their heroism when they act on it, because they're not acting on it because they're better than everything. They're acting on it because they can rise above that. And the Marvel movies embrace the ability of them to always kind of rise above whatever problems they have. And that's especially true with Avengers. These are characters who almost moments earlier are fighting amongst each other. And then the moment stuff starts to go bad, they forget that. They don't cling to those fights, and they don't need any random reason to stop fighting. They know that a better moment calls them rather than their mother's name.
Yeah, no, I don't even know if they know their mother's names. Yeah, and it's like, this is what Marvel movies, and frankly, it will be true throughout. They end up doing the right thing because it's the right thing. There's no greater reward. They're not forced into it in the way that, frankly, even some of the best superhero movies had been. It's like, well, the bad guy is attacking and we have to fight back, or this whole mess is going to happen. It's like, no, it is the right thing to do, and thus we'll do it. Not, they take that from Captain America, that's his ethos, but it's Thor. This is what heroes do. Iron Man himself, it's like, I need to do this, and I will keep doing it, even if it haunts me, even if it hurts my relationships. I can't not do it because the world requires my protection, and it's heartening. I enjoy it. This is why, other than one very specific example, a very purposeful example, when you leave a Marvel movie, you feel good.
Yeah, and I think it's important to this movie and to this ethos that the moment they come together and really act as a team is a moment where they're not fighting an enemy necessarily, but they're trying to save the helicarrier. They're trying to save people on this helicarrier. It's almost like a disaster is in place. You have Captain America and Iron Man working together to repair the ship. Now Thor is obviously fighting Hulk there, so it's not entirely teamwork, but he's fighting Hulk to kind of spare everyone else, to protect everyone else. There is an ethos to that action sequence that is that helicarrier sequence that is about saving people. And really that's what, heroism, especially comic heroism is. It's about saving people. And it's not just about fighting other people. You know, I think one of the ways that DC differs is that, especially the movies, heroism for the DC movies is fighting a bad guy. Heroism for the Marvel movies is fighting a bad guy to save someone.
Yeah, and this will be even, the contrast will be even more clear in the next big Avengers movie, which is a reaction, obviously, to Man of Steel and that sort of thing. Or actually, I think it's just specifically Man of Steel, which it kind of ties back to what you were talking about, how the Battle of New York is so exciting because they're actually in the middle of a city, and then future movies aren't that. I think is a bit of also a reaction to Man of Steel, and it just shows the advantage that Marvel had being first. Is that there is, but even there, even as this destruction is raining down on New York, the Avengers' primary motivation is to protect the people that are there. It's not to just bash it out with Zod and not care that buildings are collapsing. The fact, like they're saying, we could try to kill get Loki and close that portal, but it's like, no, we need to be here so the fight comes to us so that other people can be safe, because that's what heroes do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you see Captain America throughout that battle. You see Black Widow. You see, all the heroes at that battle trying to save people. Now, it's mostly Captain America because that's the role that makes the most sense for him. Being so much, without so much less firepower than Iron Man and Thor and Hulk. Those guys can go off and kill like the biggest monsters, whereas it's important for him to save the people. But that also matches up with his ethos and with the ethos that they're espousing of this movie.
Yeah, and it's not a complicated heroism, and that's okay. It's fine to work in archetypes because it's not like we as a society are just overrun with, uncomplicated heroes. And it's not like they're simple. It's not just, saluting and doing stuff. They have layers, but yeah, it's okay if your heroes are heroes because being good is good. And some people might shy away from that because, in 1986 we read of Watchmen and it blew our minds. But it's like, you can have superheroes just be superheroes, and they don't need to be dark and gritty, because as I've said, in this podcast and multiple ones, I'm going to continue saying it forever, that isn't necessarily the more adult response. It's just you being grumpy. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate that, the simple morality of superheroes has a place, especially when you remember that these are stories for children. Yeah,
I completely agree.
All right. So now we have finished off phase 1, is what they call it. And the bigger thing is that we've had them come together as Avengers. And because this is the internet and this is how we consume content, it's important for us to decide what order these should fit in. What are our rankings of the Avenger movies? And we thought we would do that, and we'll go 6 through 1.
6 through 1. Yeah.
All right. What is the worst of these movies, Matt?
I'm going to go with Incredible Hulk here. There was a 2-movie battle, but let's give Iron Man 2 the Justin Hammer effect.
Yeah, and also so I'm agreeing, Incredible Hulk, and I didn't always have it this way. And I think part of what it is that when I first saw Incredible Hulk, my expectations were low, and it maybe met it, maybe just a little bit above it, right? So I was like, yeah, fine, that was okay. Whereas my expectations for a second Iron Man movie were high, and it didn't meet them at all. So I was, I guess, more disappointed, more angry at Iron Man 2 this whole time. But now, watching it the way it is, Incredible Hulk is irrelevant, and it gives nothing to me. Iron Man 2 still does, which is not going to surprise anybody that it is my number 5 film.
It is my number 5 as well.
Yeah, frankly, I don't know how you could have another opinion other than one of these two being at the bottom.
Yeah, but again, Justin Hammer can only do so much. So we're both in agreement on 6 and 5. I think 4 is where we're going to differ, because I'm going to follow up the opinion I had in the last one, and I'm going to put Captain America here.
I figured, it would be odd that you didn't. This is going to be a little controversial, and not one that I would have expected until we did this rewatch, but my number 4 is Iron Man.
I understand why. I do. I don't think it'll surprise you. That's my number 3.
Yeah, I mean, I still love Robert Downey Jr. I still love Tony Stark. I love him building the suit. It's just, now that we know what these movies can be, and credit where credit's due. It can only be these because of what Iron Man was able to accomplish. It's not enough to be better than the films that came next.
I agree. And I think, again, the differences here, I think, are probably not that big between 2 through 4, at least for me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot about Iron Man that I still really like, but there's more about it that I struggle with. I don't like as much than I remember. And I think that's why for me, it's my third rather than my second, where I expect it to be.
So number 3 for me, and I'm just going to go ahead and guess for you, number 2.
Yep.
Thor.
That's right. Thor.
Yeah, if I was just doing this list, or just this list, let's try not to look ahead. Yeah. I would have had it 4 without even thinking. In part, just because that's like the public perception. But no, yeah, I like Thor.
Yeah, no. If I was asked to rank them before we rewatched these movies, as opposed to afterwards, I probably would have had Iron Man at 2, Captain America at 3, Thor at 4.
Yeah. So then I have Captain America: The First Avenger, and it's just because that movie just hits me right in the feels, as the kids used to say. I doubt they even say it anymore.
I mean, again, I completely understand that reaction, but
yeah, and it's just, I think more than anything, we will get into this, and this is actually an opinion I'm pretty sure we share. I think Captain America is my favorite character in this series.
I think, I don't know if I've ever thought about it to quantify, but you say that, and I might agree.
Yeah, we plan to rank the movies. We will continue, but as we go through, we might end up doing bigger lists like that, or maybe even blog posts. But yeah, there it is. And so, of course, Avengers is the best movie, and it's not.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And Avengers is the one that is most likely to keep its spot when we start moving forward, because we won't talk about where we rank other things, but I kind of doubt that Thor is going to end up as my number 2.
Exactly. Yes, there's room to go. But yeah, like that. Avengers is a leap forward for the franchise. It was an act of incredible ambition, as we discussed, and by God, they did it. And they did it with it was the biggest budget that they had ever had. But it was still much lower than what they have now. And, Whedon and production had to come up with a lot of creative solutions to do that. But the movie, unlike Iron Man, frankly, even like, Thor or Captain America, it doesn't feel lacking for it. The solutions they came up with worked. And part of it is because they had a lot more things to play with. But, as you say, that, Whedon might approach this more as a writer. This was a big, storytelling puzzle to solve, and it did.
Absolutely. And I think it's pretty clearly the number 1 of Phase 1. It is a fantastic movie. It is so enjoyable. It's so much fun. I watched it 2 days ago. I could watch it again right now with no hesitation, and I would love it just as much.
Yeah, and just like I said, during the big idea, during the best sequence, this movie gave me the feeling that I had been wanting from a comic book movie this whole time. Yeah. And look, I'd gotten it a couple of times, right? Absolutely. When Wolverine is fighting in a cage, and you hear a big metal sound when somebody punches his head, and then later the 2 claws pop out. Yeah, that was like when Spider-Man is swinging through in broad daylight in New York. Again, that's the bright colors. That's the big exception of movies that weren't afraid of it. That felt like comic books, but none of it felt as pure as not just that moment I spoke about, but very much this entire movie. This is why those stories captivated me when they were young. It's why they continue to entertain me now that I'm older. This movie just tapped that directly into my vein, and it still does.
I agree. So now that we have gone through Phase 1, now that we have 4 episodes of the show, I'm kind of curious to listeners out there what they think of this so far. So we want some feedback. And Andy, where can they send us feedback?
Probably the biggest one that we will respond to, and we'll give you multiple ones. But leave comments on our website. There's been some comments. Obviously, feedback at any time is good, but specifically, what about the show do you like? What is there things that you would like us to discuss that we haven't been? Is there an approach? Maybe you can keep some of the stuff you don't like, or constructive. Constructive is fine. If there's things like, that's not quite working, that's cool. But yeah, we're just wondering to know how it's working for people. I'm also curious, how are you getting the show? In what format are you taking? Are you watching? Are you listening? Is there, if you are listening, what service are you using to do it? Is it functioning well? Even just, things like that is feedback that we're interested in, because we're about to embark on the next phase. Obviously, some of it will be the same, but maybe we'll do a few things differently now that we've kind of, you may have noticed we've changed it up just a little bit of, some things that we did for the first two that we're not doing now. So yeah, just any kind of feedback you could provide would just help us give you guys a better show. So that website is www.infinitystonepodcast.wordpress.com. You can send us an email if you don't want to publicly, put that out there. infinitystonepodcast@gmail.com. You can send us an ad on Twitter.
We're at pod_infinity on Twitter. So you can hit us up there. We're happy to respond there. And you can find us on YouTube, where we ask that you would subscribe if you do watch us. You can find us on iTunes and all the other podcatchers that you can imagine.
And one quick note, we haven't done this on the show yet. If you watch on YouTube, you'll notice that we actually do run credits, and it's mentioned there, but I should mention it out loud. I want to send a quick thank you to Mark Zemer, who gave us our awesome logo and a lot of the design work on the website and on YouTube. Great work. Some of you might know his work from other shows, but really happy with what he did. It looks great.
Yeah, he's actually talented, unlike us.
Yeah. All right. I think that's it. That's phase one.
Yeah. You ready for phase two? Because next week we are hitting up Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World.
I don't know if I'm ready. Well, okay. We'll find out. Let's roll credits.